Bird. It's a plane. No, it's actually Brian talking about the new Superman movie. You saw it. I'm very, very curious to hear what you thought.
You know, we're shredding the shirt, and you know what? I got to lead off and saying, where the heck was that moment? You know, this movie is pretty much about redefining the OP Superman that we all know of, like, oh, he's too strong, and I think that that's why people are kind of always trash the IP, or the bad thing they got to say is like, how can you worry or like have drama about the Superman character when he's so OP, overpowered, and he's, you know, indestructible? Like, how do you make it? And I think James Gunn really tries to show that, if not going a little bit too overboard with that. I would have loved, and it didn't start out with it. It's kind of start out with like a forward of being like, this is the first time Superman's ever lost or got his butt kicked. And I would have just loved to have the quintessential, because they kind of lean into more so the comic book superhero. It's got a lighter feel. It's classic James Gunn playing light. He does a lot of the same tricks he does with Guardians of the Galaxy in terms of some of the fight sequences, of like the juxtaposition that you kind of see first with Stanley Kubrick in terms of the sci-fi with the orchestra, the traditional vintage orchestra, and like the juxtaposition of it. James Gunn does that with violence and like happy music, where he's like, he'll do like a heavy violent movie with, you know, just a juxtaposition of a happy song. And I think some standouts of the movie are Nathan Dillon's Green Lantern. I really liked him. I thought he was great, and Mr. Terrific was fantastic. I think that was something that they could have even leaned into more. I thought Hawkgirl was a little underwhelming. I think they could have had something a little bit more, but I felt like they were building something cool. And there was moments where you're like, this feels like the charm of something vintage. I just wish that they started off, and this is just my 2 cents, with the cliche, you know, Clark Kent. And I almost don't think they utilized Clark Kent enough. It was very much focused on Superman, and Superman being like humanizing him. And I just wanted it to start out with the quintessential him and Clark Kent ripping out the shirt, flying off, and then getting his butt kicked, which they didn't do. They just skipped that, and they never do the ripped shirt, which kind of blew my mind. I'm like, how do you not have that moment? But I thought it was a good movie. I think it's polarizing, because I think DC and James Gunn and superhero movies, unfortunately, has gone to a polarizing point, because that people will trash these movies regardless, because they're just tired of them. And again, you know, it's controversial now. But I think this is a good direction. If coming from DC making movies like Justice League, this is head and shoulders way better. Even in areas that this movie doesn't perform, it's still so much more of an enjoyable watching movie. The dog Crypto is a fun aspect of it. It's a lighthearted movie, doesn't drag on too long. So I think, you know, honestly, it's a good watch. Like, go see it. It's fun. I don't think the credit post scenes or anything where you gotta like, it just, they're little nothing burgers. It's kind of just like fun. It's not in any sort of like building onto the universe. But you know I was like, you know what? I'm not disappointed at all with this movie. Yes, I think it could have been better in some areas. I think that there's moments where you didn't buy Lex Luthor. There's moments when you didn't buy Lois Lane. There's moments when you don't buy Superman. I always bought Nathan Dillon in Green Lantern, even though he's a different Green Lantern than we're used to seeing. And I always bought Mr. Terrific. So I think that there's room to grow. But I recommend it. I think I wasn't disappointed at all. I'm happy this is progress out of DC for sure.
Okay, cool. And I have a couple questions for you before I go over these numbers. So $225 million budget, which actually for Marvel and DC isn't crazy, but definitely still high. So
and who knows if that's you know,
correct,
it's probably way more.
But they had they're up to 426 million. So my question to you, Brian, was, isn't Lex Luthor pretty jacked in the comics? And did you like the casting of Nicholas Hoult for this?
You know what? I'll let other people in the comments just speak for that. I think that maybe he's been a little heavier set, as like akin to like Kingpin a little bit. I don't know if it's like you're thinking of a little bit of Kingpin compared to Lex Luthor. Lex is more so known for like, he's like got the money and the wealth and the brains. He's supposed to be more of like a intellect and money than physical. And I think that they soup up his like intellect without it like feeling authentic. I don't know if there was parts of like he seemed a little whiny. I think James Gunn has a little bit of problem with his villains, that he takes such like his comedy undermines a lot of the more serious moments of his movie, and I wish he could balance it out a little bit better to be like, hey, I don't need to tell a joke every single moment of this film. I think that really undermines some moments with the protagonists, and I think that definitely undermines the villains, where there's a bunch of notes where Lex Luthor is like very villainous and doing horrible things, but there's something about the tone. Like it's almost the things that are wrong with this movie are almost like you can't really quite put a finger on it. What exactly is like, oh, you can't put a finger on like it needs to be this. It's just like, this isn't all the way right. But it's not wrong enough for you to be like, I hate this. You're just like, I feel like someone could nail this more, and I felt that. And I really like the David Summer-Sweat or whatever, who does. I really like him as an actor and person. I just, again, there's moments even with Lois where you're just like, there's something about you where I'm like, you're acting, or I'm not buying it. And if anybody else got that, or maybe it's just me, maybe that's my biases too as well, so like please let us know.
Okay, and I looked it up because I was curious, and I've seen a good amount of like animated films, but also read somewhat, not as much as Brian, but a good amount of comics. So Lex Luthor in some depictions are more heavy set and kind of a wider, stronger Penguin-esque looking guy, but it's varying degrees. So yeah, so cool. I'm excited to see it now. And I think, who knows what these movies go through in the executive room, in the editing room, there's no way they finish a cut and go, we're done, and then they just publish it. So we have no idea what that is, but it sounds like from Brian, it's a good step in the right direction. And I think that's a win for superhero movies and cinema in general.
Yeah, it's a good win for dogs too. Honestly, when in doubt, put a dog in it. You're probably gonna like win a lot of people over. I think, it's just relatability. I think Krypto was a little OP for sure, but you're not gonna get me complaining about a dog. So they didn't harm the dog. That's a little spoiler. The dog lives. He's all right. So for anybody worried about that, go check it out. I think it's worth the watch. And please, if we're wrong or right, let us know. Either way, we love you, and we'll see you on another episode of the Blockbuster Brothers.